On the 28th of June 2008, two teenagers, Olga Pakova and Anna Grover, disappeared. Then, chillingly, the next day, two more teenagers disappeared. They were Andrei Sakin and Varvara Kamin. All four teenagers knew each other, and it was believed that they had gone to a nearby rock festival for the weekend. But they never came home then. On August 12, 2008, authorities made a grim discovery: the remains of the four missing teenagers buried in a secluded woodland pit. Evidently, this area had been used for some form of ritual, as an inverted cross adorned with an impaled rodent alongside empty wine bottles and a spent fire pit. There had clearly been some horrific murders that had taken place there. The victims' bodies had been gruesomely dismembered and beheaded. Even more chillingly, some of their organs had been removed, with various body parts just discarded throughout the woods. It wasn't long before police apprehended a group with apparent ties to satanic practices when questioned about the motive behind the heinous acts. One member chillingly said, "I tried to turn to God, but it didn't bring me any money. I prayed to Satan, and things improved." This case is absolutely horrific. A group of young people pushing each other to commit increasingly disturbing acts. Trust me, they do some truly VC things. There's also not so much a twist, but a new development in this case, which happened very recently, and I think it's the most shocking thing of all. But before we dive in, I want to let you know that I make videos weekly, so if you want to see my next one, please drop the video a like and subscribe if you are new. It really helps me out. Thank you. This video is created solely for educational and documentary purposes. It does not endorse or condone the criminal actions described within. In 2006, a group of Satanists formed in Yaroslav, Russia, initiated by 16-year-old Konstantin Baronov would identify as a goth. He listened to rock music and was interested in Satanism and Gothic culture. While these interests might not be wildly uncommon, he found himself isolated in his social circle, seeking friendship and a shared space for these interests. He founded a group to welcome like-minded individuals. The first to join him was Alexei Chakov. He too was an outcast, and fascinated with Satanism here. With Baronov, he would no longer be alone, and they could learn from each other. The next to join the group was Nikolai Ogolobyak. This addition is unusual, as before joining the group, he did not have similar interests. He was a skater boy. He had no interest in Satanism. In fact, he had willingly been in the church choir, but something happened in his life, and it was him who was quoted as saying, "I tried to turn to God, but it didn't bring me any money. I prayed to Satan, and things improved." So was this the reasoning for turning to the devil? He was known to come from a safe background with parents who fit into the community. So why did he do this upon forming their group? The trio concluded that an initiation rite was essential. They soon decided to perform a mayab ritual that involved the killing of stray cats and dogs, followed by a ceremonial washing in the animal's blood. This gruesome act served as their perverse rite of passage, after which they adopted new names echoing a distorted form of baptism. Baronov would be known as Fangchish, Chikov would be known as Deadman, and Obak went with count. The act of adopting new names through their own version of a baptism likely provided them with a sense of separation from their subsequent crimes. Over the year, the sect expanded to include Sergei Kaprano, known as 300, Alexander Voronov, who was called Hitler, and Anton Movkin, who would be known as Dr. Goff. The docked part came from the fact that he would pierce himself and other members of the group, and I assume the needles may have contributed to the nickname. None of the individuals were originally from Yaroslav. Instead, they hailed from Rabins, a neighboring town. Details of their lives before joining the cult are scarce. Those who knew Voronov describe him as a non-threatening person, and not the most academically gifted. There was a belief that he could be easily influenced and swayed into following GS. Anton Movkin was frequently humiliated by his peers, because he was seen to them as a goth, and he had different interests. Over the next few years, the group's rituals grew increasingly disturbing. As members pushed each other deeper into the darkness, they settled on a Sekel-Ed spot for these gatherings, an abandoned plot sandwiched between a residential zone and a forsaken cemetery in one of Yaroslav's districts. There they would erect an inverted cross, a mob symbol of Satan, to which they would affix the corpses of animals nearby. They would drink red wine around a fire, but things had to keep going further into the darkness. It was reported that the group dug up a fresh grave of a woman in the cemetery. They then proceeded to force themselves on the corpse. Then they cut out the heart and the kidneys, cooked them on the fire, and ate them. They would finally dismember the body and discard the parts throughout the woods, which was seemingly eaten by wildlife. Not only were they cannibals, but also necrophiles. In the spring of 2008, the group had multiple sessions where they vandalized the Rabin cemetery. The caretaker stated that over 100 monuments were destroyed, wooden crosses were pulled out and stuck back into the ground upside down. Breaking the barrier fences and pushing over tombstones, these actions were to prove their dedication and loyalty to the devil. When and the group were not doing rituals, they would congregate around Ogolobyak's flat, as he was the oldest at 19 and he had his own place. Things were ticking over then. In 2008, a new member was to join the group. The leader Baronov had fallen in love with a girl, Kzia Kavala. She was a student at a local university. She was already very much fitting into the group. She was not paying attention to her studies or her classes. Instead, she would write dark poems and draw morbid art. She was very much looking for love, and this is when she found Baronov, and quickly they were obsessed with each other. On the evening of the 28th of June 2008, the group was around Ogolobyak drinking heavily when Baronov offered to initiate Kaval into the sect in one of their ceremonies, to which she eagerly accepted. It was at this time two teenage girls, Olia Puva and Anna Gorova, made a phone call to Ogolobyak to see if they could come over and join in the party. The two teens had been in the same class as Kryschakov at college and became acquainted with the group. Anna and Kryschakov had a romantic interest, and they had kissed at least 2 weeks before they came to the apartment. Chukov was indifferent to the girls' affections, yet he didn't shy away from engaging in conversation and casual flirtation. Olia and Anna identified with the goth subculture. However, they had never had any interest in Satanism, nor did they contemplate joining a group associated with such beliefs. However, they still enjoyed the company of the sect, as they were on their way over. It was the group leader Baronov who suggested to the group, "Why don't we sacrifice them instead of animals this evening?" Ogolobyak agreed, but the rest of the group, although eager to push the boundaries, thought that this was a step too far. They rejected the idea, but then Baronov threatened to expel anyone who opposed the idea, and with that the plan was agreed upon. Olia and Anna would become the group's first living human victims. The girls arrived at Ogobyak's flat to have some drinks and mix with friends. Anna was particularly keen on spending time with Kryschakov, as she was quite taken with him. Initially, the gathering unfolded like a typical party filled with conversation, laughter, and drinks. The two teens had no idea of the sinister plan that was forming behind their backs. As the teens got very drunk, the sect took them to a place where they had committed their previous rituals. The teens were so intoxicated by this point that even if they had realized what was happening, they would not have been able to escape. Baronov overseen everyone and was the overall leader. Ogolobyak was the enforcer. He would do the brute work, and Movkin was the organizer. He was the one who came up with how the sinister plans would be executed. Movkin decided on how Or and Anya would die. He arranged the group into a pentagram with the TE in the middle. He had what he called the Book of the Dead, which was made out of human skin, presumably from the corpses they had dug up in this book. He would document the proceedings of the rituals, but he also recited satanic text from it as the two teens lay on the floor in the middle of the sect. Nobody at this point had any hesitation. Even though they were initially apprehensive, now they were all fully committed, ready to strike and commit the gruesome act. Then at a sign given by Baronov Ogolobyak quickly attacked Anna with a knife, stabbing her repeatedly. At the same time, Voronov and Movkin pounced on Aya again, both stabbing her with a knife. The attack was very fast, and the girls were no match for the perpetrators. Anna was stabbed roughly 50 times, while Olia was stabbed over 100 times after they were dead. Movkin read another passage from the Book of the Dead, and then another attack began. The remains of Olia and Anna were decapitated and dismembered, and then the members of the sect took photos of each other holding the heads of the teens. It was now that Cavallo's initiation began. She washed her face in the blood of the victims and took the name Kara to celebrate this event. They started a bonfire and cut off the left breast of one of the teens and cut out the kidney, partial lung, and heart of another. They cooked it, and they all shared in eating parts of the victim. They said celebrated this initiation with cannibalism and murder. They then burned the teens' clothes and buried the remains in 3 pits in close proximity to the inverted cross. The sect then went back to Ogolobyak's apartment to continue the festivities the very next day. On the 29th of June, they had a new member to initiate, a young man called Alexei Solvy Baronov. In front of the rest of the group, explained to Salvi exactly what took place the night before, and instead of informing the authorities, he was even more eager to sign up. By now, the group could no longer just sacrifice animals. They needed human victims for their rituals. The same day, they selected their next 2 victims. They were Andrei S. Oren and Var Kimin. Andrei identified as a goth and was interested in Satanism. He was already friends with Ogolobyak, and this is how he was acquainted with the group. It was even rumored that he had been offered to be initiated into the sect, but he had rejected Thiara. However, was not a go, and certainly not into Satanism. She was simply dating Andre, and it was Andre who wanted to introduce her into this world. The couple had just begun their relationship, and Andre was eager to introduce Vivara into his social circle, despite her discomfort with Satanism. Andre aimed to reassure her that his friends were harmless. However, once at the apartment, Vivara felt uneasy and out of place. She even texted a friend to tell her that she wanted to leave because of their disturbing behavior. Despite her wishes, Kavala insisted on Vivara staying, employing every persuasive tactic at her disposal. Eventually, her efforts prevailed, and Vivara stayed as the night went on, the time for the initiation. Ritual approached the group. All walked to the wasteland where less than 24 hours prior, the other murders had taken place. This time, the victims were not heavily intoxicated and were aware of what was taking place. The sect had formed a pentagram around Andre and Varvara, and if anything, they just felt confused again. Muvkin read text from the Book of the Dead, and with Baronov command, Ogolobyak attacked H-Ray, and this time, Andre tried to defend himself, and he had defensive wounds on his arms and his hands from where he tried to block the knife, but unfortunately he was no match for Ogolbojak's knife. Brutally, Ogolobyak counted out loud as he stabbed Andre 666 times. Once he did this, he then turned his attention to Vivara, who was frozen in terror. She too was stabbed to death, but fortunately it was quick. The rest of the group were taken aback with Ogolobyk's brutality, but also his stamina, as if stabbing people with so much force hundreds of times was not enough. He also decapitated and dismembered them both. Single-handedly, he was enjoying this, and becoming ever more twisted like last time the group posed for photos with the remains. They took photos with the heads and the decapitated bodies before they ate parts of their victims. After this Saviv had his initiation, the remains of Andre and Vivara were again buried in 3 pits in the same location. The absence of the 4 teenagers initially didn't raise immediate concern among their families and friends who assumed had gone to the Nash FD music festival nearby. It was only after the festival had ended and the teens failed to return that the alarm set in prompting the involvement of the authorities. The criminal investigation commenced on July 21, 2008. Just shy of a month after the murders, the inquiry began with conversations with classmates of the missing teenagers. It soon became apparent that Chishchov was connected to all of them and had arranged to meet them around the time that they vanished. The subsequent arrest of AOBC and Cavallo led to a rapid unraveling of the group, culminating in the detention of the entire sect. Everyone apart from Movkin, who had fled the town and remained at large, the sect members faced several days of interrogation, which proved difficult as they initially claimed that they did not know each other. Having erased all contact information from their phones prior to their arrest, they had previously all set on one story to tell their lawyers. Eventually, they acknowledged that they knew each other and confessed to their crimes, only to later retract their statements, refuse to testify, and were consequently deemed mentally unstable when it became evident that the sect could not escape justice. They turned over information about Muvkin, providing a detailed description, and his location. Upon arrival, law enforcement was greeted by a sociable and coherent IND individual who was willing to share all he knew about the group, yet he denied any personal involvement in the group's activities. The investigators initially doubted that they had the right person due to his articulate and friendly demeanor, but this was obviously just a ploy. The initial court hearing occurred in February 2010. Throughout the trial, there was a distinct absence of remorse among the individuals involved. Notably, a non-Movkin conduct stood out as particularly shocking during the final hearing. He made a rather startling appearance in the courtroom, complete with makeup and carefully styled hair. When the presiding judge asked if the group had any remorse for their heinous acts, it was Movkin who offered a response with a smile on his face. He simply said no. It was later revealed that Movkin had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. Consequently, he received a prison sentence, but was instead subjected to mandatory psychiatric treatment in a hospital, leading to his release in 2011. Both the prosecutor and the police remained convinced that his mental stability was intact. Suspecting he may have faked it to avoid imprisonment, the sect members faced multiple charges, including committing exceptionally cruel murders, desecrating corpses, vandalism at cemeteries, and lesser charges. Nikolai Ogolobyak, who exhibited the most brutality and was the only adult at the time, received a 20-year sentence in a high-security colony. Konstantin Baronov and Alexander Voronov was sentenced to 10 years in a medium-security colony, while Alexei Shishov and Alexis Solvay received 9 years. Xiakovia was given an 8-year sentence. Sergei Kaprino, who was not directly involved in the killings, was sentenced to just 2 years after the trial. It was remarked that the law caps the maximum sentence for young people. No matter the number of crimes, circumstances, or the inhumanity of the acts, this stands at just 10 years. Had the perpetrators been older, their sentences would have likely been far more severe. Now, here's the intriguing twist I mentioned earlier. On November 2, 2023, Ogolobyak was released from prison a mere 13 years into his sentence. After receiving a pardon, he embarked on a journey within a program known as Storm Z, which guarantees a pardon for those who served a 6-month term in the Russian army. This initiative has been extended to several convicts, sparking considerable concerns and debates. There are reports suggesting that many do not survive their time in Storm Z, as it appears to be a perilous endeavor, with some viewing the participants as mere cannon fodder. Nevertheless, individuals like Ogolobyak managed to endure and successfully complete their service. His father spoke to the press after his release and said it's true he served there for 6 months in Storm Z after being wounded. He is disabled. He can walk, but the wound was serious. He is recovering. It is unlikely that they will take him to the war again. He returned on November 2nd. What I find most shocking about this case is that after 13 years, everybody involved is now free. Those 4 people died a brutal and horrific death.